The battlefield was silent now, but smoke still rose from the broken ground. Pieces of metal, burnt flags, and broken weapons lay scattered under a dark sky. The war was over, and her people had lost. She was no longer a princess, no longer a soldier. The enemy called her only one thing now: spoils of war. 2 soldiers dragged her forward, her wrists bound with heavy chains. She stumbled, her knees hitting the dirt, but they pulled harder. The alien girl's once bright eyes were now full of fear and hate. Her silver hair was tangled, her fine dress torn. Every step reminded her that she had no power left, no voice. Left, the human soldiers around laughed and pointed at her. Some shouted cruel words, some whispered what they might do if she were theirs. She kept her eyes low, her heart beating fast, waiting for pain, waiting for the end. Then she was pushed. In front of a tall man. He was different. His armor was dusty, his rifle strapped to his back. He didn't laugh like the others. He only looked at her quietly. "This one's yours," one soldier sneered, shoving her toward him. "Your reward." The alien girl's breath caught. Reward? Was she now nothing but a gift to her enemy? Her chest burned with shame. The man did not smile. He only nodded once, then held the chain in his hand. His grip was strong, but not cruel. He looked at her as if seeing more than a prize. Still, she did not trust him. No human could be kind, not after what they had done to her world. They walked to the outpost camp. Every soldier they passed turned to stare. Whispers followed them: spoils of war, prize, captive. The alien girl kept her head low, but her mind raced. Should she fight? Should she run? Or should she wait for her chance? Oh man. They reached a small metal hut. The man unlocked the door and guided her inside. The room was simpler: bed, a chair, a lamp that flickered weak light. He shut the door behind them, and silence fell. The alien girl stood frozen, her back against the wall. She waited for his command, for his cruelty, for the moment he would claim what others said was his. Her breath shook. Her hands trembled. But the man did nothing. He placed her chain on the bed, set down a tray with food and water, and stepped back. His voice was calm, quiet. "Eat," he said. She blinked at him, confused. Was this a trick? Her stomach was empty, but her pride was stronger. She turned her face away. She would not obey. The man did not force her. He only left the tray there, and sat in the chair, arms crossed, watching but not moving closer. His eyes were not hungry like the others. They were tired, heavy, almost sad. Hours passed. The girl's hunger clawed at her. She glanced at the food again and again. Finally, when the man turned his head, she reached out and tasted a piece of bread. It was dry, but it filled her mouth with warmth she had not felt in days. When she looked back at him, expecting a cruel smile, he only gave the smallest nod. No words, no victory in his face. The alien girl's heart beat faster. Who was this man? Why did he not treat her like spoils? Why did his silence feel heavier than chains? She lay on the bed that night, still bound, still afraid, but with one new thought: maybe her story was not over yet. The night inside the outpost was long and heavy. Outside, soldiers laughed around fires, their voices echoing through the camp. But inside the small hut, there was only silence. The alien girl sat on the bed, her chains rattling whenever she moved. She hugged her knees close, her eyes fixed on the human man who sat across the room. He did not speak. He did not touch her. He only sat in the chair, staring at the floor as if his thoughts were miles away. The lamp between them flickered, making his face half in shadow. She studied him carefully, waiting for the mask to drop, waiting for the cruelty she knew would come, but it didn't. Her stomach twisted with hunger. The bread she had eaten earlier gave her some strength, but it also made her realize how weak, She hated herself for eating it, for showing weakness in front of him. She hated him for giving it without asking anything. It confused her more than any insult or whip would have. The man finally looked up. His eyes were steady, not sharp. He spoke one word: rest. She narrowed her eyes. Rest. How could she rest in the room of an enemy? How could she close her eyes when he still held her chain? Her body stayed tense, her heart beating fast. The man did not insist. He leaned back in the chair and closed his own eyes. His arms folded across his chest. Within minutes, his breathing slowed. He was sleeping. The alien girl could hardly believe it. He trusted her enough to sleep in the same room. She looked at the door. It was locked. She looked at the chain, too strong to break. Still, she imagined herself slipping free, running into the dark forest outside, vanishing forever. But then she remembered the soldiers' laughter, the cruel way their eyes had looked at her earlier. If she escaped, they would catch her. And if they caught her, they would not treat her like this man did. Her chest tightened. For the first time since capture, she felt something strange fear of others, but not of him. Hours passed, and the silence grew heavier. She lay back on the bed, though she kept her eyes open. She watched him as he slept. His face was tired, lined with scars of old battles. His hands were calloused, but they rested quietly on his chest. He was not like the soldiers outside. He was something else. When morning came, he opened his eyes without surprise. He stood and brought another tray of food, water, bread, a small piece of dried meat. He placed it near her again. "Eat," he said simply. She turned her head away at first, but her stomach betrayed her. Slowly, she reached out and took a piece. She expected him to smirk, to say something cruel. But again, he said nothing. Her anger burned. Why did he not act like an enemy? Why did his silence make her feel more trapped than chains? She wanted to shout at him, to demand answers, but she did not know his words well enough. Instead, she muttered in her own language, bitter and sharp. He didn't understand, but his eyes softened, as if he knew what she meant. For a long moment, their eyes locked. Hers were full of hate and fear. His were full of something she could not name. The door opened suddenly. Another soldier stepped inside, smirking. "How's your prize? Has she obeyed yet?" The alien girl froze, her heart racing. But the man's voice was firm. "Out." The soldier chuckled but left. When the door closed, she looked at the human again. For the first time, she felt a spark of safety, confusing, fragile, but real. Her story was not over. Something was changing, and it began in this silent room. Asterisk. The days passed slowly in the outpost. The alien girl remained in the small metal hut, her wrists still bound by chains. The human soldier, her so-called master, spoke little, and his silence pressed on her like weight. He brought her food every morning and night, always placing it in the same spot before sitting back in the chair. He never forced her, never demanded, but that made her more restless. She wanted him to reveal his true nature. She wanted him to show the cruelty she expected from humans. Instead, his quiet patience broke her thoughts apart. On the third morning, he placed the tray in front of her as usual. This time, she didn't touch it. She crossed her arms, lifted her chin, and looked him straight in the eye. Her voice trembled, but she spoke in her own tongue, words he could not understand. "I will not eat, not from you." The man tilted his head slightly. He didn't move closer, didn't shout. He simply said in his low voice, "Eat." She turned her face away. The hours dragged. Her stomach twisted painfully, her throat dry. She hugged her knees and glared at the wall, pretending not to care. But the smell of the bread filled the room, and her resolve shook. The man sat still in his chair, watching quietly. He made no attempt to push the tray toward her. He only waited at night, when the camp outside grew loud with drunken laughter. The girl's pride finally cracked. Her hands shook as she pulled the bread close. She broke a piece and put it in her mouth, chewing slowly. Her body betrayed her. Hunger won. When she looked up, his eyes were on her. She expected a smirk, a cruel laugh, but he only nodded once. No words, no triumph, just quiet acknowledgement. Her chest tightened. She wanted to scream at him. Why did he not act like the others? Why did his calmness feel more dangerous than chains? Later that night, the door opened suddenly. 2 soldiers entered, both grinning. One held a bottle in his hand. "Hey, let us see your prize," one sneered. "They say she's beautiful. We want to look." The alien girl's blood froze. Pressed against the wall, her chains rattling. The man stood. His voice was sharp this time. "Out." The soldiers laughed. "Come on, just a look. You can't keep her to yourself." He stepped forward, his shoulders squared. "I said out." His tone was cold, dangerous. For a moment, the soldiers hesitated. Then, with curses under their breath, they left, slamming the door behind them. The girl stared at him in shock. Her heart pounded. He had defended her. Again, slowly, she whispered a word in her own language, barely audible. Why? He didn't answer. He only sat back down, eyes steady, face unreadable. That night, as she lay awake, her thoughts tore at her. He was her enemy. He had taken her as a captive, a prize. But twice now, he had stood between her and cruelty. Her pride told her to hate him. Her heart whispered something else. Something dangerous. The chains around her wrists felt heavy, but her thoughts were heavier, for the first time since her capture. She wondered if her survival was tied not to escape but to the strange silence of this human man. Asterisk. The camp was restless the next morning. Rumors of victory spread through the soldiers, and with victory came drunken pride. Fires burned brighter, laughter grew louder, and the alien girl felt the weight of every stare when she was led outside for a short walk. Her chains clinked with each step, and the sun reflected off her silver hair, making her stand out even more. Whispers followed her like poison in the air. "Look at the spoils. She's a prize of war. Lucky he got her first." The girl kept her eyes on the ground, but her ears caught every cruel word. Her cheeks burned with shame, and her hands clenched. She hated them. She hated all of them. One soldier, bolder than the rest, stepped forward. His smirk was wide, his eyes sharp. "So this is the alien treasure. No wonder you keep her locked away." He reached for her chin, as if to lift her face. Before he could touch her, a strong hand grabbed his wrist. The man, the one who held her chains, stood tall, his jaw tight. His voice was sharp, cutting through the crowd. "Don't touch her." The soldier laughed. "What's this? Getting protective of your prize?" He tried to shake free, but the man's grip tightened like steel. "She's not yours alone. Everyone knows captives belong to the army, not to one man." The alien girl's heart raced. She expected the human man to step back to avoid conflict with his own kind. Instead, his eyes hardened. "She's under my watch," he said. "You lay a hand on her, you deal with me." The laughter around them faded into uneasy silence. The other soldiers exchanged looks, uncertain. The bold one spat on the ground, but pulled his hand away. "Fine, keep your prize. But don't think you'll fool us. She's still nothing." They left, muttering and shaking their heads. The alien girl stood frozen, her chest tight, her thoughts a storm. Why had he done that? Why protect her when he could have joined their cruelty? Why risk angering his own soldiers for a captive? When they returned to the hut, the silence between Them felt different. She sat on the bed, watching him carefully. For the first time, she dared to speak in broken human words, her voice trembling. "Why? You stopped them?" The man looked at her, surprised that she had tried to speak his language. His answer was simple, spoken without hesitation. "Because you are not nothing." Her breath caught. The words struck deeper than chains ever could. She wanted to deny them, to shout that he was lying, that he was still her enemy. But her voice failed. That night she lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. His words echoed. In her mind, not nothing. Her people had been defeated. Her world burned. To the victors, she was just a trophy, a reminder of conquest. But to him, his eyes had not seen her as spoils. His voice had not called her worthless. She turned on the bed, her chains rattling softly. Confusion filled her chest, heavier than fear. What was he? An enemy? A captor? Or something else she did not yet understand? The alien girl closed her eyes, but rest did not come. Her heart beat faster, not with terror this time, but with a dangerous, fragile hope. The days blended into each other. The alien girl no longer sat with her eyes fixed only on the floor. Now, sometimes, her gaze lifted toward the man who watched her in silence. She still feared him, still hated the chains, but something inside her had begun to shift. One evening, the man returned with food, as always. But instead of leaving it silently, he pointed to the bread and spoke a word slowly. Bread. The girl frowned, unsure if she understood. He pointed again, tapping the bread. Bread. Her chest tightened. Was he trying to teach her? She clenched her fists. She was not a child. She did not need his help, yet her mind repeated the sound. Bread? The next day, he brought water and said another word. Water. This time, she whispered something in her own tongue, refusing to copy him. But curiosity pulled at her. At night, when he was half asleep in his chair, she whispered the word softly to herself. Water. The next morning, he caught her whisper. His eyes softened, but he said nothing. It became a silent game between them. He would name simple things, chair, lamp, Dorrand. She would pretend not to listen. But later, when she was alone, her lips shaped the words. Each sound felt strange, heavy, yet alive. One night, after many attempts, she finally gave in. He pointed to himself, pressing a hand to his chest. Daniel, she blinked. His name. T repeated it. Daniel, her heart pounded. T, she pressed her own hand to her chest. For the first time since her capture, she spoke clearly in his language. Lyra. The sound of her own name in the room made her throat ache. She hadn't said it since the day her people fell. Daniel's lips curved it, a cruel smile. But something small, almost gentle. He nodded. Lyra, her eyes stung, and she quickly turned away. She could not let him see the weakness in her. The days that followed grew different. Though her chains remained, she no longer felt invisible. Her name had been spoken again, and she could not erase the warmth it brought. She began to look forward to his words, though she would never admit it. But the camp around them was not. Blind soldiers whispered when Daniel walked past, saying he treated his prize too kindly. Some laughed, others grew suspicious. Their eyes followed Lyra with hunger and jealousy. One night, as Daniel left the hut briefly, a soldier slipped inside. His grin was sharp, his breath heavy with drink. "Let's see what makes you so special," he muttered, stepping closer. Lyra froze, chains clinking as she backed into the wall. Her heart thundered, panic rising. She opened her mouth to scream. The door slammed open. Daniel stood there, eyes burning with fury. He crossed the room in 2 steps and shoved the soldier back, his voice low and deadly. "Touch her, and you'll regret it." The soldier snarled, but Daniel's hand tightened on his rifle. After a tense moment, the man cursed and stormed out. The hut fell silent again. Lyra trembled, her chest heaving. Daniel turned to her, his expression softening.
"Safe," he
said quietly, pointing at her, then at himself. Safe. Her breath caught. Safe. Could she believe that? Could she trust him? She whispered her answer, shaky but clear. Safe. The word hung between them, fragile as glass. For the first time, Lyra felt that her chains were not the only thing holding her in this room. Something else tied her here now, something she feared even more. Asterisk. The night was quiet, except for the distant crackle of fires outside the camp. Inside the small hut, Lyra sat on the bed, her chain heavy around her wrist. She could not sleep. Her mind was a storm. Daniel sat in his chair as always, but tonight his posture was different. He wasn't watching her. His elbows rested on his knees, and in his hands he held a small object. The faint light of the lamp revealed it's a folded piece of paper. It's worn from many years. Lyra tilted her head, curiosity winning over caution. She shifted slightly, the sound of her chains making him glance up. Their eyes met, and for once, he did not look away. Slowly, he opened the paper. It was a picture. She saw a human woman, smiling, and a little girl with bright eyes standing beside her. The paper was old, faded, but the warmth in the faces was clear. Daniel spoke softly, his voice carrying more weight than usual. My family. The words struck her. Family. She understood that word. She repeated it quietly, testing the sound. Family. He nodded. His finger touched the picture gently. Wife. Daughter. His voice grew lower, heavy with pain. Gone. Lyra's heart tightened. She didn't know the details, but she understood loss. She remembered her own people, her home reduced to ash. She looked at the picture again, then at him, and for the first time she felt something other than fear, something close to pity. He set the photo down carefully and leaned back. His eyes looked far away, beyond the metal walls. War took everything, he murmured. Lyra hugged her knees, her voice trembling. War took mine too. The words came slowly, broken, but he understood. His eyes softened, and for the first time, silence between them felt shared, not empty. That night, Daniel didn't sleep in his chair. Kea stayed awake longer, staring at the lamp until it burned low. Lyra pretended to rest, but her eyes remained open, studying him in secret. She had always thought of humans as monsters, destroyers. Yet the way he touched that picture, the way his voice cracked when he said gone, told her a truth she could not ignore. He was not just a soldier. He was also broken. The next day, when he brought her food, Lyra did not look away. She met his gaze and whispered his name. Daniel. He blinked, surprised. Then, slowly, he nodded. Lyra, her chest warmed. Hearing her name in his voice no longer felt strange. It felt alive, but peace did not last. That evening, whispers spread louder through the camp. Soldiers grumbled that Daniel treated his captive too gently, that he was weak. She overheard laughter outside the hut, ugly, mocking laughter about her and about him. When Daniel entered, his face was grim. He set down the food without a word and sat heavily in the chair. The silence was sharp now, filled with things unsaid. Lyra's heart raced. She wanted to ask, but fear stopped her tongue. Instead, she reached for the bread and whispered, safe. His head lifted, his eyes meeting hers. After a pause, he said quietly, I will try. The answer chilled her. Try, not promise. Not certain. That night, as Daniel finally drifted to sleep, Lyra lay awake again. Her chest ached with confusion. He was her captor, her enemy, but his sorrow had touched her heart. He was the only shield. Between her and the cruelty outside, her chains were still tight. Yet in the dark, another chain had formed, one that bound her heart to his. Asterisk. The camp grew darker in more ways than night. Whispers about Daniel spread like smoke. Soldiers mocked him in secret, calling him soft, saying he had fallen weak because of a captive girl. Lyra heard their laughter outside the hut and felt fear, not for herself, but for him. One evening, as Daniel entered with food, his face was tight with tension. He did not sit right away. He stood near the door, his hand pressed against the frame as if carrying a heavy weight. "They want to take you," he said quietly. Lyra's heart pounded. She understood enough words to catch his meaning. Her chains rattled as she stepped back. "Take me." He nodded, his jaw hard. "Commander said tomorrow." Her stomach turned to stone. She had seen the way other soldiers looked at her, the hunger in their eyes. If she was given to them, she would not survive with her dignity or her life. Daniel's fists clenched. His voice dropped, rough with anger. "I will not let them." She blinked, confused. He was only one man against many. How could he stop them? That night, he unlocked her wrist chains for the first time. The metal fell to the ground with a heavy sound. Lyra rubbed her wrists, staring at him in shock. "Go," Daniel said, pointing to the door to the forest beyond the camp. His voice was firm. "Run." Tonight, her breath caught. Freedom, it was the one thing she had dreamed of since the day her people fell. The chance to escape, to vanish into the dark, to never again hear the word spoils. But her legs did not move. She looked at Daniel, his face shadowed by the flickering lamp, his eyes heavy with pain. He was offering her what no other human would. He was giving up his prize, risking his own punishment just to give her a chance at life. Her throat ached. She stepped toward the door, her hand hovering near the handle. But then, slowly, she turned. "Back." "No," she whispered. Daniel froze. "No." She shook her head. "I stay." Her words were broken, but her voice was steady. For a long moment, silence filled the hut. Daniel stared at her, disbelief in his eyes. "Why? You can be free." Lyra's chest rose and fell quickly. She searched for the right words, but human speech was still hard. Finally, she touched her chest and whispered, "Safe. With you." The words struck like fire. Daniel's breath caught, his eyes flickering with something he tried to hide. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. "You don't understand," he muttered. "If you stay, they'll come for you and for me." Lyra stepped closer. The first time she had ever moved willingly toward him. Her chains were gone, yet she did not run. "I stay," she said again, firmer this time. Daniel looked at her for a long time. His eyes, once full of silence, now carried a storm. Finally, he nodded slowly, as if surrendering to something greater than war. The night passed with both of them awake, neither speaking much. But the air between them had changed. She was no longer a prisoner, refusing escape. She was a woman who had chosen her place, and deep inside, Daniel knew this choice would cost them both dearly. The morning came heavy with tension. The sun barely touched the camp, yet soldiers were already moving, sharpening blades, checking rifles. Lyra sat inside the hut, her heart pounding louder than the noise outside. She was free of the wrist chains now, but freedom did not feel safe. It felt like a shadow waiting to strike. Daniel entered with a grim face. He closed the door quickly behind him, his movements sharper than usual. He looked at her with a mix of anger and worry. "You should have gone," he said quietly. Lyra shook her head. Her voice was steady, even as fear pressed on her. I stay. He stared at her, his jaw tightening. They will come today. The commander. He knows. He will take you. His words broke like stones, and I can't stop them all. Lyra rose from the bed. For the first time, she stood tall in front of him, without trembling. She pressed her hand to her chest, then reached out and touched his arm. Safe. Here. Daniel froze. The warmth of her touch ran deeper than any wound he had carried. He wanted to argue, wanted to shout at her for risking herself. But the look in her eyes held him silent. Outside, the sound of boots approached. Loud voices called for Daniel. Bring out the spoils. Commander wants her now. Lyra's heart leaped. Panic filled her veins, but Daniel's hand moved to his rifle. His body stood like a wall between her and the door. The voices grew louder. Fists banged against the metal. Open up, soldier. Daniel turned to her, his eyes burning. Listen, you must hide. She shook her head fiercely. No hide. Stay. The banging grew into shouts. Soldiers outside cursed, demanding the door be opened. Daniel's hand tightened around the weapon. He knew the moment he defied them openly, there would be no turning back. He looked at Lyra again. Her silver hair glowed faintly under the dim lamp. Her eyes, once full of fear, now burned with something else, trust. She had chosen not to run. She had chosen him. His throat tightened. He lowered the rifle just for a moment and whispered, "Then we fight." Lyra's breath caught. She was no soldier anymore, no warrior of her fallen people, yet something inside her rose again. The shame of being called spoils of war melted, replaced by a fragile strength she hadn't felt in so long. The door rattled violently. Last warning, Daniel, step aside. Daniel raised his rifle and spoke low, not to them, but to her. Stay behind me, no matter what happens. Her hands trembled, but she nodded. The door burst open, crashing against the wall. Soldiers flooded inside, their faces twisted with anger and greed. The commander himself stepped forward, his eyes sharp. What is this? He barked, You defy orders for a slave. Daniel's voice thundered. She is not a slave. The soldiers laughed, but the commander's face darkened. He lifted his hand, signaling for them to seize her. Daniel moved before they could, his rifle aimed steady. The first man who tries will not walk out alive. The room froze. Tension snapped in the air like fire. Lyra's chest heaved as she clutched the bed frame, her heart screaming louder than her voice. She had chosen her chains. Not because they bound her wrists, but because they bound her heart. And now, in this moment, she knew the cost of her choice would be paid in blood. Asterisk. The hut exploded with chaos the moment Daniel refused to step aside. Soldiers shouted. Boots scraped against the metal floor, and the commander's glare burned with fury. Arrest him. The commander roared. 2 soldiers rushed forward, rifles raised. Daniel moved like lightning. His rifle barked once, twice, and both men fell before they could touch Lyra. The rest of the room froze. Stunned by his defiance, Lyra's body trembled, but her eyes never left Daniel. He stood in front of her like a wall of iron, his stance unshaken even as more soldiers crowded at the door. The commander's voice cracked like a whip. Traitor! You would kill your own brothers for this? For a worthless alien? Daniel's answer was steady, filled with a fire none had seen in him before. She is not worthless. The word struck Lyra harder than any chain ever had. For a moment, she forgot her fear. Her heart beat with something fierce, something alive. But the soldiers did not stop. More poured into the hut, shouting, raising weapons. Daniel fired again, forcing them back, but he was only one man. His rifle clicked empty, and he swung it like a club, knocking one soldier down. Another lunged forward with a knife, and Daniel shoved him back with raw strength. Lyra's breath came fast. Her hands gripped the bed frame so tightly her knuckles turned pale. She wanted to scream, to fight, to do anything, but she had nothing but her voice. The commander's face twisted with rage. He drew his own weapon and aimed at Daniel's chest. "You will die for this." In that instant, something inside Lyra broke free. She hurled herself forward, slamming into the commander with all the strength left in her body. The weapon fired. The bullet grazing Daniel's arm instead of his heart. Daniel roared in pain. But his hands struck fast, disarming the commander and throwing him to the ground. For a brief moment, the hut fell silent. All eyes on the bleeding soldier who had just risked everything for an alien girl. Daniel grabbed Lyra's arm. His voice was sharp, urgent. "We can't stay. We run now." Lyra's chains rattled against the floor as she stumbled with him. They pushed through the stunned soldiers. Daniel's rifle raised once more. He fired into the ceiling, the deafening sound forcing the men back. The two of them burst into the open night. Flames from the campfires painted the sky orange. Shouts of betrayal and alarm echoed behind them. Soldiers ran to give chase, but Daniel pulled Lyra toward the forest, his wounded arm dripping blood. "Faster!" He barked, though his own steps were slowing. Lyra clutched his hand tightly, her lungs burning. For the first time since her capture, her heart was not heavy with despair, was heavy with something else. She was no longer running from humans. She was running with one. The camp behind them roared with chaos. Daniel had turned from soldier to traitor in one heartbeat. The humans would hunt him now, as they once hunted her. As they reached the trees, Daniel stumbled, falling to one knee. Lyra dropped beside him, panic filling her chest. His arm bled badly, his face pale. "No, stop," she pleaded, shaking him. "We go." He looked at her, pain shadowing his eyes. But even through the weakness, his voice was firm. "I will not leave you. Ever." Tears stung her eyes, but she pulled him up with all her strength. They vanished into the dark forest together, the sound of soldiers chasing close behind. Behind them, the commander shouted to the night, his voice filled with rage. "Find them. Kill him. Bring her back." But Lyra knew she would never go back. Not while Daniel still stood. The forest swallowed them whole. Branches whipped against their faces. Roots twisted beneath their feet. And the night rang with shouts of soldiers chasing close behind. Daniel's breath was heavy, his wound bleeding more with every step. Yet his grip on Lyra's hand never loosened. "Keep running," he urged, his voice hoarse. Lyra's lungs burned, but she refused to let go. She had chosen this path. She had chosen him. The further they went, the quieter the sounds of pursuit became. Finally, when Daniel could no longer keep his pace, they stumbled into a small clearing, moonlight falling like silver on the grass. He dropped to one knee, clutching his arm. Blood soaked through the torn fabric. Lyra knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she tried to press against the wound. "No die," she whispered fiercely. "You stay." Daniel gave a weak laugh. Shaking his head, "You sound like me now." His eyes softened even through the pain. Stubborn. Tears filled her eyes, but she held them back. She had been called many things spoils. Prize, nothing. But now, for the first time, someone looked at her as if she was worth saving. She would not lose that dot behind them. The faint sound of soldiers echoed again. Time was short. Lyra's mind raced. If they kept running blindly, they would be caught. She remembered the old paths of her people, the hidden ways through the forest before the war. Slowly, pieces of memory returned, streams that cut across the land, caves that hid in the cliffs. If they could reach those places, the soldiers might never find them. "Follow," she said, pulling at his good arm. Daniel hesitated, his face pale with pain. "You know the way?" She nodded firmly. "I know." Step by step, they moved deeper into the forest. Lyra led this time, guiding him through shadows and silence. The roles had changed. She was no longer the chained girl dragged through dirt. She was his guide, his strength. Hours passed like years, but at last they reached the mouth of a narrow cave. Cool air drifted from within, carrying the promise of safety. Daniel leaned heavily against the wall, his body nearly giving out. Lyra pressed her hands to his cheeks, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Safe," she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel's lips curved in the faintest smile. "Because of you." The words shattered her heart in the best way. She leaned closer, resting her forehead against his. For the first time, she felt no chains, no war, no hatred. Only warmth. Outside, the forest slowly quieted. The soldiers' shouts grew distant, then vanished altogether. They were alone. Daniel's head rested back against the cave wall. His eyes fluttered closed, but his hand still found hers, holding it tight. "Whatever happens, I don't regret this." Lyra's throat tightened. She had no perfect words in his language, so she gave the only truth she had. "Not spoils. Not slave. Lyra." His eyes opened again, and he whispered her name like it was the only thing that mattered. Lyra. For the first time since the war had taken everything, she felt whole. She had been dragged into captivity as nothing but a prize, but here, in the arms of the man who had defied his own people for her, she had found something stronger than victory. Stronger than war. Love, as dawn touched the sky beyond the cave. Lyra held Daniel's hand tightly and whispered a promise to the rising. Light, no chains again. Never. And though the world outside still burned with war, inside that cave 2 broken souls had built something untouchable. Beyond captivity, beyond betrayal, beyond fear, they had found freedom together. Asterisk.